So welcome to this conversation about home education. And this is absolutely our pleasure to be able to be hosting this conversation. I'm Lainey and Sarah Beal is here. And you are surrounded beautifully by 3 or 4 other home educating moms that have been doing this for a while. And so for those of you that are joining us, that are new to home education, feel like you're being held and supported, because I love how this community just shows up for each other. Like, how beautiful is that? So Sarah, you want to say hello to everybody? Yeah, you.
Sorry, because there's 2 Sarahs. When you ask for a Sarah, maybe say the Sarah that's not about to drop a kid, and then me.
I mean, okay.
So I'll share with you just quickly, in case any of you can identify or relate. I guess there are some nuances based on which country they're from or are in, and there are some specific things going on in the United States at the moment that you guys are facing that some of the rest of us are not, and that will play into choices that you make and where you can get support. I was certainly a mum who always, from pretty early on, was worried that my children, because I could see how they were naturally, was amazing. And I reflected on my own schooling, which wasn't, awful. It was fine. But certainly I was looking at my small people that were learning how to walk and talk and eat peas with their forefinger and thumb and all this stuff that I wasn't teaching them. They were just knowing how to do it. And I remember thinking, man, I don't know about school. Like, I don't know if I kind of felt it would be to the wolves, really. That's the best. But I did. I still threw them to the wolves because I didn't really know what else to do. And of course, even when a system seems wrong, we still know it. There's familiarity and there's comfort. And I've got to say, I liked being able to drop a child at school and knowing that someone else was for teaching them stuff, not me. That was cool. I liked that. But the more children I had, and the deeper we got into that system, the more damaging I could see it was to my children. And I'm not making any judgment on how other people choose to relate to the school system, because I'm also really quite experienced at advocating for my children in the school system. And I know that you can do that. And you can do that, really effectively. Many people do it for the whole school life, advocating constantly for their children. But it's pretty tiring. And I've got 4 children, and it was starting to actually be all-consuming, really, getting children to school who didn't really want to be there, getting them to stay at school when they just wanted to come home with me, and then constantly advocating for their life at school. And really, eventually, it just became untenable for us. And so my children, really, one child in particular, pushed our family into that decision, even though I always knew I had a heart for homeschooling. I really still needed someone to push me, which was my second child. And what really pushed us in the end was that I could see the light going out in his eyes. And I know many other families can relate to that. This light that humans just have at birth, like we're just on fire for learning and living and connecting and being human. And that just happens, like, without us doing anything. They just are like that. Children are so amazing. And my, I guess he was probably like 7 or something at the time, year-old, was always this, the learning and the absorption was always very evident in him, in a different way to my other children. And he was just on fire all the time, like so excited. And then he was losing it, and he was going to bed at night saying he didn't even want to be alive because he couldn't stand the thought of going to school every day. So actually, like, we just couldn't keep going. We really just went, nah, we just actually can't go anymore. So we didn't have a plan. We didn't have an idea really of what our schooling life or our educational journey was going to look like. But the imperative was, I actually need to keep my kids okay. And that was really it, actually. It was, right, well, we're just going to do it then. And, you know, it's been an adventure ever since, because of course, as parents, no matter how kind of like liberated and free thinking we think we are, there's this little like agenda in here. And I would, you know, do you guys know the term strewing? Some of you probably do, where you just like casually leave some stuff around, some books, some puzzles. Hey guys, do you want to read a book about, I don't know, whatever? And I would do that. And I would like, oh, let's read this book together. And then every single question they asked, I'd be like, oh, let's look that up. You know, I was following all the, you know, the home educating guidebooks about teachable moments and never wanting to miss an opportunity. But my children had other ideas, and very quickly I needed to drop that agenda. It still sneaks in sometimes. It still sneaks in, and my children are so amazing at holding me accountable to that, and they don't let me get away with anything. And so actually it is, our journey has been about my children really informing everything that we do, and how we relate and how our day goes, and they have almost complete freedom in that. And so that has been an evolution. There are other ways to approach this. You know, you might feel like you've got some time on your hands, and you might want to think about what education means and could look like for you. And we can talk about the different styles of home educating. And there's so many resources and groups that can support you in any one of those. And so if any of you do kind of go, well, you know, we think this is where we're heading, we've got a few months to sit on it. I mean, that's one of the benefits of being in like lockdown situations around the world, is that at the moment many people cannot go to school, and so this is a beautiful opportunity to think quite consciously and intentionally about what you want learning to look like in your family. And it looks different in everyone's family, you know, even though we might say we do this or we do that, or we do Charlotte Mason or we do Steiner. I mean, every family literally looks completely different. And Lainey and I are both big fans of not having labels. And sometimes we use the words because that way everyone kind of knows what we're talking about, but they're limiting because they make you feel like you have to stick to rules. And thing about home educating is, man, you can just live with like no rules. Well, you know, your values that you set for your family, but that's different to rules. Sorry, I do tend to ramble, so.
No, Sarah, I think everything you said is really, really powerful, and I really appreciate that. And she basically gave an overview of everything, which is amazing. I want to really dive into not only the fears that have been shared so far, but I want to see maybe number one, give me a show of fingers. Number one finger would be you've been thinking. So what I want the answer to this question. The question is, are you coming to home educate? Why are you coming to home education? Number one would be because I've been thinking about it for a while, or number two, I'm forced to make a decision because of the pandemic. So if I can see those, okay. Oh, three. Do you want to unmute yourself, Melissa, and share what three is for you?
Well, I suppose what I meant by that is that both of those reasons, you know, I've been wanting to homeschool since my child was about 3, but made a lot of excuses or just had like limiting beliefs, but it's always been like really in my heart for the last 3 years. And then because of the pandemic, it's now forced me, it's basically took all those, you know, excuses that I had, and now I'm not left with them anymore. So, so it's a combination of the both.
Fair enough. And I think that's quite self-aware to be able to know that. Yeah, amazing. Okay. So for those of you that are coming to this because of the pandemic, um, this question is specifically for you. Is this something that you would choose to do home education, um, perhaps maybe like Melissa in the future, but have just put it off, or you were totally against it in the beginning, always against it? And if you want to, yeah, unmute yourself, or you could type it in the chat window, whatever feels best for you.
So I'm going to echo what the other Melissa said. I think I'm in the exact same boat that she is, that it's always been something that I have considered. It's been something that my daughter has been asking for since preschool. And like she said, I think that there was just a lot of, I don't know how we would make it work questions. And then with all of this, it's like, okay, now is the time to figure out how to make it work. I think that the last couple of months of this previous school year, where there was remote learning and I was working from home, and so she was doing her education, on the computer, while I was working at home on the computer, it really showed us that, one, like, my child is really self-motivated. Like, she really has the tools innately that I think are some of those things. Like, I can't how to be self-motivated, and she's got that, and so I can teach the other things because she has that foundation. And so I think that that's been really reassuring that we can do this. And then also, like the other Melissa was saying, like, now is a time where I guess it's a better time than ever to make this decision and to give it a try and see what happens. But I think that those last couple of months really increased our confidence level as an entire family that, you know what, we can make this work.
Yeah. You and Melissa, you two are both in the perfect position to really move forward with confidence. And I'm really, I'm so happy that you're here and able to articulate those things. And Nicole, you also had your fingers up.
Yeah. We have kind of a weird, different situation where I've wanted to unschool, or actually unschool, but my kids have been on this train of the system. My oldest is now 15, and he is a bit of a linguist, and so he was part of an immersion program, and then we moved from Maryland, and he loved it. And then we moved from when he was in first grade to Portland, where he was part of a French immersion program, which he loved. And then we found another middle school that had democratic and very had a lot of choices in education, so he loved that. And he's a very social person, and he loves having like lots of adults that can inform his education. Like, he seeks that out, and so he's really thrived in the school system. And really, when I've been like, maybe we could homeschool, he's like, heck to the, like, no, not happening. And then I have another one that's 2 years younger than him, and he was in the French immersion program, and it was not a good fit, and I could see that. And so I wanted to pull him, and he was like, he knew nothing other than school, and that's what his big brother did. And so it ended up becoming such a horrible situation that I ended up pulling him in third grade, and he stayed with me for about 6 months. We did nothing. Like, my husband's like, what's your curriculum? Like, what? I'm like, we're gonna jump on a trampoline, and we're gonna like drive around town and go to every jump house, and we're gonna like hang out. And we did that, and it was great. But he really missed the structure of school. So he's back in school. So we found another school for him. He's back at school, but I can see for him, it's just not. I can see it sucking the life out of him. So I keep exploring it, but he's not open to the possibility of homeschooling. And then my youngest is very type A, go-getter, and she's in a Japanese immersion program, and it's an incredibly social program. She's knocking it out of the park. She's loving it. So my kids are all really engaged in school, and I'm like, no, let's stay home and like learn, you know. And so we're basically considering homeschooling next year because of the virus and because we have some health issues, so we don't feel comfortable with sending them given what they're offering us as an option. So I'm in this situation where I don't know that I want to accept my kids being sitting on a computer for 5-6 hours a day in order to stay part of the system. So I'm trying to explore the of like, can we do this COVID homeschool thing for a year, but do we not necessarily buy that model and then, you know, kind of hack our own for a year and then see what happens? But my concern is that I know my children, all three of them, want to re-enter the system. So I'm kind of trying to figure that out.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I do have one, and I know Sarah, you unmuted yourself, so I know you probably have suggestions too, but I do have one suggestion to make for everybody who is just approaching homeschooling for the first time or home education for the first time. I'm all about family culture, and I'm all about defining as a group what your values and ethics and morals are as a family and jointly owning that. And one of the exercises that I recommend for families to do when they first approach home education, and Nicole, I think this would be really great for your family, would be to create a family meeting, put a hat or a box in the center of the room, and have everybody define on a piece of paper an answer to the question of what is education to you, and have everybody share on a piece of paper and put it in this box. And that way they've got an idea and the ability to first explore it. And it doesn't matter how old your kids are. They could explore that definition by themselves and really share what that idea is without feedback from the family. And then after everybody is put in, you can put as many strips of paper as you want into this box. You can pull them out and discuss them as a family. And you'll find that some kids, probably like your daughter, who's really interested in Japanese and immersion and all of these other things, the idea of the social interaction is to support her interest. Or maybe you'll discover some things that you didn't actually consider. And that way too, as a family, it helps you decipher what those ideas are. If kids just think that education means school, you can ask them to go deeper. Well, is school good? Does school serve you? Does school, ask these really sort of exploratory questions and find out if there is a positive response to those things or a negative response, and go deeper and find out exactly where where your kids are on that, spectrum, I guess. Not spectrum, but scale, I guess, would be a better word. And that way too, especially as Julie was saying, being forced to make a decision, there are these emotional impacts. And you can decide at that point, as a family, as a unit, what that is going to look like. And the other thing about doing this exercise with a box or a hat and putting the strips of paper inside, you have the ability to define what education looks like from your family as a whole family input, and you can give your family permission to edit or modify that at any particular time. So you can do that exercise again and compare 1 month to, what it looks like in 1 month, what it looks like in 3 months, or so forth. And that way too, there's that empowering input of ownership from everybody in the family, and it helps then to support and move forward. Now, how you define what that means after you've got your list of what's important to your family, that's up to you to decide whether you decide on all these different types of modalities. That's fine. Let's try Montessori or Charlotte Mason because it supports these things. And if that doesn't work, you can modify that too. So anyway, that's just one suggestion in response to what Nicole was saying. Sarah, did you want to pop in and talk about something?
Well, I was just going to acknowledge, first of all, that I can understand that having children that want to be at school and can't for whatever reason is quite a different proposition on the face of it to those of us who are actually in the opposite situation where our children don't want to go to school and we've got endless time to go through deschooling and designing our life in a different way. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I think that is a really tricky position to be in, and I've got a lot of empathy for you, and those of us with more than one child have probably been through this, like, oh, what if one of my kids wants to go to school? Well, how are we going to manage that? What are we going to do? And I don't know what we would do, and I keep hoping that they will all just keep not wanting to go to school because I think that there are extra challenges associated with that. But I did want to say that we talked about, I think Julie mentioned something about deschooling, and I think there can still be some value in the idea of that, Nicole, anyway, even if at some point your kids think they want to go back to school, because actually deschooling is really about decompressing and dealing with all of those feelings of grief, maybe perceived lack of control, anger at not having a say over stuff, like whatever it is. And even if in 6 months or 12 months, one or all of your kids are going to go back to school either by choice or not, the idea of spending some really intentional time now going through this process of deschooling could really still hold some value for you, because what most people find when they approach that with some intention is that process, particularly if you've got some people around to support you while you're doing that, allows you to, and your kids too, to break down or work through, the ideas they had about what learning or education looks like, what school means. I mean, that's what Lainey was really talking about. And I still think that there's value in you thinking about how you might approach that. Because actually what it also does really, if you say to yourself, right, we're going to sort of deschool, and I mean, for many of us, it goes on for the rest of our lives anyway, because we're so conditioned into this system. That's certainly true for me. But it actually really allows you to take the pressure off, which I think, lots of the specifics of your situation, there's a lot of pressure there for you, like a lot of weight of trying to get everyone to where they want to be, trying to keep kids up to speed to re-enter the school system. Like that's full on. And I do want to acknowledge that that's full on. And if you think about how deschooling can work, Lainey's just put up a question, is everyone familiar with the term deschooling? And I think I assumed that you were, and I apologize, but basically what it is, yeah, you're nodding. So yeah, it's just really this intention to kind of go, Like, that's really what we was like, everyone just take a deep breath, and that deep breath will go for as long as you want it to go for. And really what we did was we're just on holidays and we're just going to see where that goes. And some people might say, you might have heard people say there's something like two months per year of school. I mean, you know, I don't even know what that means, but at least you can go, right, we've got 10 years combined school between us, or however you want to approach it. Let's just say we're going to give each other 1 or 2 months each to just take lots of deep breaths and hang out and enjoy each other's company and kind of forget about school. And even though you've probably got in the back of your mind somewhere, but we're going to go back and I need to keep these records and I need to keep these kids on track, while you're taking your deep breaths and reconnecting as a family, I think what often happens is that your values as a family evolve in that time, and a whole lot of reassessing happens. And what can also happen is that you start noticing all of the stuff your kids are doing that is learning, and if you needed to be recording stuff, you will find stuff to record. And there are some really practical tools and things that you can do to help do that, and everyone's probably got their some of their favorite kind of tools that they like to use to record things. And while you're not busy worrying about it and you're just taking the foot off, I wonder if your mind will just be freed up to notice all of the learning that is going on, and your kids might notice the same thing.
Yeah.
And also just wanted to welcome Lindsay, because she's in and she might have to pop out.
Hi.
I was wondering, Julie, do you mind speaking to the emotional I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you feel comfortable, do you mind speaking to the emotional challenges from the experience of somebody who's active in the alternative education community and all the things?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and Nicole, I recognize that you would never force your kids to homeschool. What I meant by that was that, you know, we are forced to homeschool, whether it's from COVID or say there was a bullying situation at the school, or for whatever reason, school's not working out for your kid, which are 1,000,001 reasons that it could not be working out for them. There's this sense, these feelings, this, I mean, I categorize it like true grief. I mean, there's a true loss happening there. You have a loss of community, you have a loss of connection to the school that has been, you know, a cornerstone in your life for so long, or that you'd been looking forward to if your kids are really little. Like, this was, you know, what your envisionment of what education was going to be like. And all of a sudden, all of that comes crashing down, and you feel lost, and you feel, you know, the loss of control, like Sarah said. And there's just so much mental and emotional stuff that makes this deschooling process, period, even more important. And that, you know, in part, yes, we use this period to decompress a lot. And it's not just the kids who need to decompress, it's the parents. And, you know, if there are some really deep-seated issues there, you know, then I definitely recommend seeing a, you know, a professional therapist who can help. And there are some in our community who are really adept at helping families with, within the homeschool, unschooling structures. Whereas oftentimes you'll find, you know, people outside our community don't really get it, you know? So, you know, Lainey and I bet you Sarah also all know people that we could refer to if you really feel like that there's some more deeper stuff needing to get dealt with, because it's just like true grief, and it would be okay if you felt immobilized by it, like true grief. I mean, like that's what happens. And I think, you know, bringing an awareness to it and letting us, you know, sit with it and talk about it and, you know, address it, we can, you know, get through it together.
And I was just going to type this, and I figured, well, it might be easier to just say it. Just so we know, if grief leads to anxiety among any of your family members, it's impossible to make a decision while you were experiencing anxiety. Literally, that part of your brain shuts down. So know that it's not a good time to be forced to make a decision, and acknowledge exactly where you are. I did want to share, those of you that know the work that I do, I work a lot with teens, and couple of years ago, I was working with a teen who was unschooled all their life and wanted to go to high school. And they wanted to go to high school, so I worked with them to sort of work through what that meant. And they wanted to go to high school because high school meant all of these things to them. And I helped them to identify what those things were. And at the end of all this, this process that we went through, it wasn't the high school that they wanted, it was all of the other things. And there were some beliefs surrounding why they needed to go to high school. And those beliefs were beliefs of a culture, a society that weren't actually theirs. And just to have the language to unpack those things in a safe space as a family is the most powerful tool that you can give to your children. Whether they want to go to high school and they end up going to high school, it's not really the point, but to have the language to really dig down deep to be able to identify what that motivation is. And you've got to be able to go there within yourself as well as a parent. Is the reason why you want your children to go back to school fear? Is the reason that you're stopping home education fear? I just think it's just about unpacking all of that. I did want to address early on, there was well, first of all, were there any questions about anything that we've talked about so far? Because I do want to address some of the initial, when I ask people to put in their fears that are stopping them, I want to sort of switch gears and go to those things. But before we move on, is there anything that we've talked about so far that we should address? Yeah. Yeah. Julie says she knows that making fear-based decisions, especially about education choices, is her kryptonite. It's such a great term. Thank you for saying that. Is there anything else that we should address before we move on? Yeah. Interesting, right? And so Georgina says that her daughter wanted to go to school, and it turns out that she thought the reason why going to school would be a benefit to her 5-year-old daughter was she would get a new backpack. And something as what we see as small and trivial as that's huge to a 5-year-old. And that just means the world. And acknowledging that there's that idea associated with a specific act is powerful. And I think especially when we're addressing our kids' needs, fears, desires, and wants, especially when they're that young, we can't dismiss them, even though us as adults, we could chuckle, like a new backpack is such a sweet thing. But to your daughter, Georgina, that must have been huge, right? Yeah. Yeah. School dress, yeah.
And I just wanted to say that a lot of that stuff, I think, my children were the same, or a couple of them were, is about identifying with a community. And so, you're a 3 or a 4-year-old, you're seeing everyone walking past in their uniforms with their school bags and their lunch boxes. And this is our sort of folklore, really, our fairly modern day folklore around what it means to be a child. What it means to be a child is you get to 5 and you go to school. That's what you do. And that means having a backpack and having a bow in your hair and wearing the uniform. And if we're not doing that, what are we doing and who are we? And so much around how we identify ourselves and who our people are is very caught up in school, and it's a rite of passage as well. And we are humans we need rituals and rites of passage. And so if we're not doing school in that way, in that conventional way, what else are we doing? And having a community around us is really important, even for children who, you know, we might not think are overly social or don't need to be around people a lot. They still are really programmed to need to be held by a community and to know who their people are and who they identify with and what their rituals and rites of passage are. So that's also something worth thinking about if you're living without school, how we can provide those rituals and those connections for our kids, because that's what it means to be human, I think.
Yeah, powerful. There was, in the beginning, there was one of the fears that I wanted to make sure that we addressed, and I'm not going to call you out. If people want to scroll back, they can see who wrote it. But for the sake of this recording, one of the members here said that her biggest concern was her own teaching abilities and not having effective learning techniques. She was concerned that her son, getting to a certain age, then realizing that her son actually didn't have the skills or education level that they need to thrive and earn a good income as an adult. That's a very common fear, that if we choose home education, our kids are not going to get everything that they need. That is a very common fear. This is unpacking that fear is probably one of the most important things that you're going to do. At the root of that fear is a belief that education is a sort of set, confined, defined set of skills and knowledge base that only you can get from an institution. So you're already up against a belief that is not serving you as a home educator. So know that if you're stepping into home education, that belief is going to give you doubts. That belief is going to give you all sorts of challenges and fears, and it's never going to be solved. The only way that you can actually combat that fear is by redefining and getting to the root of what education actually means to you and your family. You mentioned at the very end that you have a strong belief that education is the only way that your child will have a good income in the future. And I would say that your first step in reprogramming that belief is looking at people that did not go through a traditional system and are earning a good income. I would attack this belief from every single perspective as you can. I don't know if you know the method of mind mapping. Mind mapping, where you take a thought and you put it in the center and you draw out sort of, you have to do this by hand. You draw out all of the sort of branches of the main idea, and I would start looking at what the belief actually means to you and how it sits in your mind of foundational beliefs. And then you can start addressing all of those things. I had, by the way, I'm not going to call you out, but I had the exact same belief when I first started my journey. The exact same belief. And I never once questioned it until I started doing the work and really unpacking what was behind that belief. It gave me the power personally to make space for a new way of being in my own educational journey. And I realized that moving into home education with my child was really about re-educating and redefining what all that meant in my own mind, in my own way of being. So that helped me to really secure the partnership paradigm of, hey, we're going through this together. And that was super, super important for me in my own personal journey. I would love to open this up and see if any of our home educating veterans would like to speak to this, because this is one of those powerful ones. It sits at the core, stopping many people from home educating.
I just posted in the comment section here a video by Alan Watts. It's well, the video is by the folks Trey and Matt who do South Park, but the words are Alan Watts, and they animated it. And I show it to everybody. I can't sum it up in words that do it any justice. I just encourage you to watch it. It's a very, very short video. It's like a minute long, and it puts a lot of things into perspective.
I just wanted to talk a little bit from more like personal experience. So from the age of 7 until 14, I was in international schools overseas, and then at 14 I started homeschooling for myself. And just my dad always goes back to I moved to my dad when I started homeschooling, and the last parents' evening he attended for me, that he always remembers this geography teacher saying, you know, Georgina's really going to struggle and she's going to fail if she doesn't get her act together. And he just remembers this seed in his head thinking, you know, when he was making the choice to take me out of school. And I was actually moving to North Miami. I think, Melissa, you said that you live in North Miami. So I was moving to North Miami with my dad, who's a Brit, and I was doing my GCSEs at the time, the IGCSEs, to still do. So I still wanted to get the qualification, but it just wasn't going to be at school. And my dad said, George, what's the best way to do this? Like, how are we going to tackle this? And I said, you know what? Leave it to me. I'll be fine. I'm going to do it myself. And so I did. And I just got on with it. And he kept checking in. My dad's a very hands-off person. He kept checking in saying, are you all right? And then at one point I said, no, I'm not all right. I don't know how to teach myself Spanish and maths. And so he got my brother's kindergarten Spanish teacher to come over and help me with my Spanish. And he got a university student to come and teach me my maths. And that was it. That was literally all his input. And I did well, like I did really well for me. And he was like, afterwards, we had this big discussion of like, well, he said, I thought you were going to fail. He's like, I genuinely thought you would fail. And he's like, I didn't want to say that because I wanted you to like give it your best shot. But I genuinely was like expecting you to fail. And then I came out with like a really high A in geography. He said, that geography teacher, she freaked me out. I thought you were going to fail. And what I got from doing the home education myself was I took so much pride in my learning. And for me, home education, speaking to a bit of what Nicole is, to me, home education hasn't actually meant not always being in school. I chose to go back into school actually at 18 to do a year. But to me, what it was more about me owning my learning, and learning being not just school. Like school was part of what I did to learn. If I needed a qualification, there it was. But what I really took out of it was actually about, this was my journey, was it gave me this whole new paradigm that learning is not school. School can be part of my learning, but that is not the extent of my learning. And going back to that idea of fear of earning and living in the future, I've actually found that one of the reasons I've loved the idea of home learning is that it just almost blows the lid off of what the ceiling is. Like all the kids that I know who've been home educated, some of them are at university now at 14 years old because they want to. You know, the idea that, or some of them are never going to touch a school in their life and are paid artists, you know, by the time they reach 16 or whatever it might be, is that all of a sudden school just becomes one part of how you can learn rather than the way of learning. And that was just, from my experience, was the empowerment to own my education more. And whether it's as a parent, like to own my children's education together with them and go, what could this look like? And so that was just my thing, is then, and the skills I got from that, I remember where I was going with this as well, is the skills I got at kind of 14, 15, when I did that, having allowed me to make choices as an adult that I actually believe have made me successful in my chosen path, because I then got out of this idea that I had to do things X, Y, Z way. just the little another anecdote was, I remember being 18, I'd gone back to college in London now. And I remember the teachers giving us a career class. And they said, you've got 3 choices. You either go to university, you take a gap year, or you get a job. And I remember going, well, I want to go to university, take a gap year and get a job all at the same time. So I was like really like annoyed by this idea that I had to pick one of these. And it was literally like 1, 2 or 3. So I actually did all 3. I signed up to an online degree. I went traveling around the world and I got a job at this, like, I started an online business at 18. I was like, that doesn't make sense. I can only do one. I want to do all 3. And I feel like if I hadn't done what I did at 14, I wouldn't have had my mind open to that. And I just think it redefined success for me. And so that was my little anecdote. I hope maybe just that maybe it opens our mind when we look beyond school of what else is possible and redefines our success non-traditionally maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And somebody made the comment while you were speaking that you had the opportunity to be trusted when you were a young person. Therefore, you were able to use that experience to trust your children. And that to me is really important to acknowledge, whether we had it or whether we didn't have it. This is an opportunity as a parent to redefine the way of being. Like, we don't, like Georgina knows, we do a women's circle, and last week we were talking about habitual thinking. We don't have to be a slave to our own habitual thinking, which means beliefs about certain topics, meaning I can't trust my children because nobody trusted me as a child. That may be an unconscious, subconscious thought, but we don't have to run that track. We don't have to continue that pattern. As parents, this is as much about our own journey as well as the journey of our children. So, and the only other thing that I would say to that is it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to be fallible and lose your mind and not understand and to be in fear, and to let your children know that that's part of the journey that you're taking with them, that kind of unpacking all of this stuff together is a family journey, right? So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge that, and thank you, Georgina. Did anybody else have anything that they want to add about trust or being trusted on this journey?
So I don't have anything to add to that, because it was actually my fear, which I'm okay with sharing. And I just wanted to say thank you so much. The information that you shared, the anecdotes and your experiences, very, very helpful. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that, you know, in listening to what you've said, especially like Georgina just sharing your anecdotes there, I think one of the things that, you know, I feel really overwhelmed with is just the sheer responsibility, because of course one of the reasons I want to pull him out of mainstream school is because I want to be able to foster this lifelong love of learning, right? And I want it to be uncapped, but at the same time, that's an enormous responsibility, right, to make sure that it happens. And, you know, some of my own things that I need to move away from is, I had a wonderful, you know, mainstream school education. I was very lucky that I thrived in regular school. And one thing I remember is that I had amazing teachers. I had some key teachers that I can remember now as an adult that were very influential and helped foster that love of learning. And, you know, and so I think for my son, when I talk about like this grief or loss, I think, wow, I almost, am I going to be doing him a disservice, because now he just gets me. And, you know, whilst I know that I can work on, you know, myself as an educator, like, you know, he won't have those teachers are amazing, right? They're teachers for a reason, because they have a special way, they have a skill, they have that connection, they have that ability to just ignite a passion within a child. And again, I had that for myself, which I really believe contributed to my success in learning. So I think just hearing you say that has made me realize, so I'm going to do the mind mapping. I think that will help. I think that will be in there as well. And maybe that's something that I need to consider, that, you know, maybe I want to have external teaching or external influences there, you know.
Melissa, one of the things that we adapted as we started our own home education journey was I was not my son's teacher. I was his facilitator, and that opened up the universe to bring in apprenticeships, to bring in mentors, to bring in teachers, to be able to seek out partnerships in learning about specific things with other people. Apprenticeships are so underrated and so absolutely amazing. And if it's based on the interest of your child and they are asking for the, you know, deeper knowledge and deeper learning in certain subjects, the partnership of you and your child going out to find that apprenticeship or that mentor or that class is, you know, that's a powerful approach to their learning.
I like that facilitator. I think you saying that has literally now just flipped the switch for me, because I've been like, I'm assuming this role of a teacher, and that's where I think I'm gonna fall short, right? Which is so weird, because I for a living I'm actually a coach. I'm a business coach, and so I've had this like real internal conflict, like how can I be a business coach but yet not be a teacher for my child? So maybe I'm just his coach, maybe I'm his facilitator, and, you know, that makes a lot more sense. So thank you.
Lainey, can I kind of tag on to what you were saying? And so I know that I posted this in one of the posts that Lainey had when this conversation was getting started. So one of the things that I am going to try out is I started a conversation with a handful of other like-minded moms who I know that our kids are like similar in age, and we're all trying to kind of figure out this new way of education moving forward. And so the conversation is all of us moms just talking about like what are things that we are good at and what are our strengths and what are like areas that we would feel comfortable in teaching the other children. And so we're gonna kind of do like it's a really unofficial kind of like partnership or co-op or whatnot. And so everybody's kind of doing their own different types of education, but then we're gonna come together. And so I feel really comfortable in teaching American Sign Language and geography, and I'm a mental health clinician who works with children, so I would feel really comfortable teaching the kids about like emotional vocabulary and working through emotions and feelings and conflict resolution and those types of things. One of the other moms is a yoga teacher already, and so she feels really comfortable in teaching yoga and mindfulness and various things. One of the other moms is really into like gardening and knows all about like plant identification and is really into taking her kids out into the woods and teaching them, you know, all that wilderness things. And so we're not making it like an official anything. It's just really going to kind of see how it plays out. We're having our first meetup on Tuesday. And so we've already been kind of talking about like, and one person said that she used to be a journalist and has a degree in journalism. So how cool would it be for the kids to kind of create their own little like newspaper media outlet? You know, we're gonna like kind of just see like what the kids want to do and just kind of go with the flow, but we're gonna try it out and we're gonna see what happens. And so it's just yeah, I see so many, I can't see the full post, but something about the legal definitions of co-ops. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, like ours is gonna be really unofficial, just kind of more just like a partnership of women kind of and moms coming together and just seeing like what comes out of it, and not making any official designation of anything. It's just like-minded moms partnering together and seeing what comes of it.
I just wanted to acknowledge what Melissa was just mentioning, Melissa Esposito, when you said about flipping your thinking from feeling that weight of having to teach your child to actually imagining just kind of cheering them on, which is really what a coach does, right? Like providing an environment and then just cheering them on. And really that's the basis of trust anyway, or vice versa. And I remember and I still do it actually, my kids will ask a question and then I'll go, oh, I don't know, let's look that up. And they'll go, nah, because I fall into this trap still of trying to teach them stuff that they don't actually want to know. Sometimes they ask a question and they don't want to know the answer. They just want to leave the question hanging, to just kind of sit with it. And sometimes they want to explore it in their own way later, and just verbalizing the question was really just like a brain dump, you know, like we all do. Sometimes we just like make notes for ourselves and we know we might not answer it, but we just needed to get it out. And so I still find myself going, oh, I have to teach them something. And they will literally say, my 6-year-old actually said to me today, Mum, can you stop those words coming out of your mouth now? And because she asked me a question like, did God make the world? Something that you naturally think is going to open up this really exciting, massive conversation. And then, but she doesn't actually want to know the answer right now. And so still I have to go, no, no, just like pull back. And so I just wanted to say that, I hope that you can feel, and it might take some time because it still takes time for me, liberated from the weight, the burden that we might feel of teaching our child. And when you develop some new habits, and one of mine has to be like biting my tongue, that's my habit that I'm still trying to cultivate, that you can just share in the joy of learning that you do together, rather than that traditional dynamic of parent/teacher and child under here. That over time, actually what happens is you go like this. And instead of feeling this burden of having to teach them, you gradually notice that what you're doing is sitting in this space of joy in sharing a partnership of learning. And it doesn't mean you always have to want to learn the same stuff as each other, because that's the other thing that can happen over time. That you are all free to explore the things that you're all interested in, and you may share those things and sometimes you may not, but it's just sitting in this space where you can be really excited when your son learns something, whether he wants to involve you or he doesn't. It's beautiful and it's joyful, and there's no weight. You will be free.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to make sure that there were 2 other fears that were expressed and that we do get to those. So the first one was one of the moms didn't feel like they felt adequate enough to record, maybe not adequate, maybe that's not the right word, but to record the learning during the home education time in order to provide the school that they're going back to with sufficient records. So that's the first one. And then the second one is I absolutely want to address the fear that if I do this and give freedom, my child will be on Fortnite 24/7. So I want to address both of those. But for the first one, in terms of record keeping, record keeping is probably one of the most simple challenge to address. It's about administration. And after this call, I can give you lots of resources and articles and links on how to do it. One of the tools that I love to use for record keeping is Trello. Sarah can affirm how much I love Trello. So Trello is a free application. You create these boards with cards and you create topics and so forth. And it's super easy to just jot down what you're doing every day. So the record keeping part is quite simple. You can also use spreadsheets and all of these other things. And I don't know specifically if the record keeping, the act of the administration is the problem, or if the fear is coming from the act of not following guidelines. If the fear is of the act of not following the specific guidelines that your child needs to learn, okay, not so much. Okay, so if the goal as your family is to enroll your children back in school after a year, then for me, it's all about the all in with the family, being on the same wavelength, having the same goal. If you're deciding that this 1 year of unschooling is what you're deciding to do, if you choose that, and then you go back to school, it's up to you to do the record keeping. If everybody's all in, and you've decided that this is how you're going to do it, however, you acknowledge that going back to school, you will have had to have met these certain requirements, then spell those out. A year, the year, moving into the year, say, okay, we all agree we're going back to school in 1 year. So over the year, we have to learn this outline of stuff that has been predetermined by the school district as something that you need to have learned. How are we going to do this together? And put the ownness and the ability to own that experience back into your children's lap. Let them know if this is how we want to do it and you don't want to be behind, we have to learn this body of information. How should we approach it together? Should we do it through apprenticeship? Should we do it through actually going through the curriculum together as a family? Do you want to do this on your own? Do you want me to support you and put you on a schedule? How do you want to approach this? And give them the ability to make that decision. You don't have to do it the exact same way that the school districts do it. You can actually learn that information in your way. So there's that. Does anybody have any other suggestions for this mom about learning a specific content for that year being required to? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, can I just say it's funny because we were walking. I'm the one that put that question. We were taking a walk, and I said, we don't have to do the online option. We could just hack for a year. We could just unschool for a year. We could just completely unplug and just do whatever you want to do for a year, and then just see what happens, And he was like, we could do that. Oh, I want to do that, and I'm going to do this and this, and like he just totally took ownership, and it was like awesome, and we had this awesome conversation, and it was so exciting. And then he said, well, what happens when I go back? Because he's entering high school, and there's specific credits. And so I said, well, we'd have to figure that out because you're supposed to have certain credits for freshman year. And it's like I could see just like the light dimming, like, oh, okay, so how do I, and then he's like, okay, well, what if I just start now and just like knock out all those classes, and then I can, and so, but then we look online, it's not available till the fall, it's like trying to, I don't know, I guess there's a lack of my understanding of like, how do I offer those specific classes? Because when I approached the school, they said, well, be really careful what classes you take because we may not count it because it might not have the specific agenda that we've set forth in order to hold that credit. So it was like all that fear and pressure of like, not just, can we just fuck school, excuse my language, can we just step away and like let that passion and let you learn whatever you want to learn? But so I think there's a lot of emotions that I'm having going through this process and figuring out how to like stay 1 foot plugged and in, but also have the freedom to have 1 foot out and just explore what we want to learn. So I don't know if there's anybody else in the U.S. that have high schooler, and how do you fulfill the requirements of that high school while being home?
I'd like to address that, Nicole, just very briefly. Your last statement said it all. If there's anybody else in the United States that has a high schooler, and that's the thing, is that we're all in the same boat right now. I get it, or the same storm, different boats, same storm. And your school will be dealing with hundreds, thousands, depending on the size of the school, of high schoolers who may not fit their box just right for, getting credits and moving on. And if you or anybody really thinks that they're going to hold kids back and not let them go forward, because they just can't. So what I would do is I mean, and I hear that you're getting this pushback from the school, but I would connect with other parents and be like, well, if we've, none of us have fulfilled the math requirement for sophomore year. I mean, are they really going to keep the entire, 10th, 9th grade math class back, or 10th or whatever? So, and then there are also other classes out there that there are universities that offer high school level classes. Here in California, they call it A to G. It's like a specific, like you were saying, there needs to be a specific content requirement that they have put their stamp of approval on. So there are other people that offer these things, and it is private, but also virtual. So often somewhat affordable, and there's often, especially in the bigger institutions, financial aid available for families who might need it. And so there are resources out there to either A, tick their box, or B, just be like, nobody's going to be able to tick that box, and we're going to move on anyway. We're all going to move up. They're going to graduate everybody, and I think that's what we're going to end up seeing.
And I just wanted to add to what Julie said is, if we're looking at a full school year in its entirety, that's a big piece to comprehend. But if we just take it in little bite-sized chunks, like, okay, so they're doing, units in social studies or units in English about this. If you don't have the exact class, you could say to them, well, we did fulfill the units in English and we did do this, and I'm going to present it. And just as Julie said, they're not going to reject everybody. I mean, the district itself is in a very strange, position at this moment, that they're going to be more apt to just accept what you've done. So it's up to you to say, I am the parent, I am the facilitator, and here's what we did to fulfill that particular unit, and have that confidence to know that your child learned, if that's how you want to approach it.
There's also then, so say you end up doing the Japanese immersion through OutSchool, or you find a mentor or tutor that works one-on-one, or you find a Japanese immersion like class that's online that, everybody could sit and talk around in Japanese, or a book club, or, some sort of just a chat group or whatever, something that fulfills that. And it's not like a real class that has credits and documentation for it. Okay, so now your kid fully understands Japanese. I mean, their goal has been achieved. And if they're not going to get credit for it in high school, oh well, then they'll fill their high school credits with something else. I mean, the goal is learning, and I get that the goal is also to have a high school transcript so that we can, move on to college. But as we're seeing more and more, colleges are recognizing learning outside the box as extremely valuable. So if they see your pandemic schooling time as something that, where this kid was like, oh, well, I might not get credit for this, but I still want to learn Japanese and I'm going to learn it anyway, that's going to look way better on their college transcript than the classes that they would have taken.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole, I want you to leave this meeting feeling empowered, like you could do anything. Like, that's the point. And if you're feeling stuck about a certain topic or a certain, particular approach, by all means, reach out. Like, all of us here, we have resources and areas to, resources to point you in, so that you feel like you're approaching this with confidence. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm. Okay, I want to talk, is there anything else about this? Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that sometimes this stuff is just like one bite at a time. And when you get some really good networks, and we can help you with that. I've got a couple of people in my head, even though I'm not in the States, but I've got a couple of people in my head that I reckon we could connect you with, that I'm pretty sure would be happy to connect with you to talk to some of the specific stuff, you've got some really specific concerns, and yeah, I'm pretty sure and we might even be thinking of the same people. Yeah, and I've got an Australian friend who's got their unschoolers, and her adult daughter has lived in Japan and studied in Japan and is now fluent in Japanese and largely self-taught, that I can definitely connect you with, as well as some people to talk to about the high school stuff. So it seems overwhelming sometimes, but just like one little bit at a time. And, you know, your kids have got their whole life. You know, the idea that this has to be done by the time they're 18 or whatever it is in the US, it's not true. Like, this can go on forever. It can go on into, you know, like we can learn and go to high school and go to college until we die. There's no limits.
All right, so if there's nothing else on that topic, I do want to talk about the fear that if I give my child freedom, they'll just be playing video games. Who else feels like that's a reality? Yeah, okay, okay.
Oh my God, can I take this one?
Go ahead, Sarah. I'm going to run to the restroom real fast.
Can I, sorry, Sarah, just before you get started, because like I do have that, I just wanted to throw it in at the beginning, so maybe you can talk from this perspective as well. My son is 6 and he will naturally choose video gaming over anything else. And so my concern with that is that he's going to choose it while I'm working. So I'm a single parent and I'm now working from home. So it's from that perspective of me not being able to, you know, supervise, right? It's in those unsupervised times, which I would absolutely love him to be like, Mom, go work. I'm going to read a book and play with my counting blocks and maybe draw an amazing picture or write a story, but that ain't going to happen. So, yeah, so I just wanted to throw that in there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely hear you, and I know exactly how you feel. And a few years ago, I had those same fears. And, you know, we've talked a lot about fear, but, you know, fear and then trust, which is where you get to when you work through those fears, is so pivotal to our journey with our children, particularly if we want to be in partnership with our children. And I remember being in that same place of, oh my goodness, my children just want to play Minecraft for 16 hours a day. And really needing to do a lot of work on why I felt like that was a problem, because they certainly didn't have a problem with it, and still don't actually. And really what was at the root of that for me, and this may not resonate with you, if it does, and if it doesn't, you know, we can keep working on it, but it was imagining a future that actually, when I thought about it and started unpacking it, I could not know that that future would exist. So looking at a 6-year-old playing video games all day and imagining that in 20 years' time, they were going to be a 26-year-old who'd forgotten how to feed themselves and wet their pants because they're playing video games all day long. And really that didn't seem that likely. When I really observed my children and human beings and the way we're really hardwired, that didn't seem very likely. Actually, it seemed a bit ridiculous. And so I had to be really open with my kids too. And I think that's important, because I was on a journey and they were on a journey. But we were kind of coming at it from different places. So I think it's really important to be open about your fears with your children. But I think it's also important that our fears are not their fears, and that we don't burden our children with our fears. So there is a degree of needing to do a lot of this processing away from our children, so that the weight of our fears don't impact on their freedom. But I have always been really honest with my kids about, oh man, this is something that I know is really important to you. I'm struggling with it. And so I'm doing that work so that they know. A lot of people find it really helpful to think about the learning opportunities that are present in gaming or YouTube or TikTok or whatever it is that your kids like to do. And on lots of sort of unschooling and radical unschooling pages, there's lots of working through that stuff, and that can be helpful in the early days as well. Like if you feel like you want to play around with the idea of more freedom and more autonomy, I think it's important that you feel comfortable and that, you know, you still feel like you're doing a good job as a parent, because that can be important for you too. And so noticing some of those learning opportunities can be helpful. And I certainly did do a lot of that in the early days of opening up to a lot more freedom, noticing all of the problem solving and the teamwork and the reading and the maths and the science and the geology and all of the stuff that goes on with almost every video game that you can think of. And that helped me step into that next phase with my children, because I just felt like I needed that comfort. I needed to go, okay, if we're going to play this, if we're just opening up to kids are doing whatever it is that they're feeling like they want to do in that moment, and I need to feel comfortable, that really helped me get to that next bit. And again, for me, has been very much about just bite-sized pieces. And so, you know, whatever it is that your son is enjoying doing, I bet if you feel like you want to take that approach, that there are so many really obvious learning moments that he's enjoying while he's doing that. And that comes back to this connection that you'll have with him and that we have with our children. That's often the missing piece when we read all of the articles in mainly mainstream media about how damaging gaming and being online are, and all the predators that your kids are going to meet online, and how you know, all of the stuff that is just, you know, breeding this fear. What they don't tend to speak to is the connection and the relationship that we have with our children, and the way we engage with them, and the way they want to share with us what they're doing, and they want to tell us what they've made in Minecraft, and they want to give us a tour of their worlds. Yeah, you're nodding your head. So they're the opportunities, and actually they're even more important than noticing the learning. It's like, man, if your kid wants to show you their TikTok dance, you watch them show you their TikTok dance. If your kid wants to talk about what basalt is, I don't even know, or, you know, they've discovered an extinct breed of tiger, like, you listen to that stuff, and that's where the opportunities lie. And that's where the fear can start really disappearing, because they're inviting you into their world. And that is such an honor and such a gift for our children to invite us into their world. I mean, I remember being a teenager and not wanting my parents anywhere near my world. And so the fact that our kids want us in their world and they want to share it with us is, it's comforting as well, because there's not many things that go on with our children that we don't know about, because they're just really open. And because we're not judging how they're spending their time, we're seeing value in it because they see value in it. And so I guess what I would say is, have a think about what your concerns are. Are you imagining something in the future that's unlikely? Are you imagining your child isn't going to be able to read, or isn't going to be able to relate to other people? He's going to forget how to speak because he's been on YouTube for so many hours. Think about, and even if they're really extreme and really ridiculous, which sometimes these fears actually are, like, say them to yourself, verbalize them, and then you can start unpacking what they are and whether they're true. Are they founded in truth, or are they some imagined scenario? Do you know, like, have you had a think about where your concerns specifically are, Melissa?
Yeah, and that's very helpful, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think I already started that process, but then I caught myself and I said, you're now just reasoning, right? You're now just making up, you know, forgive my French, like, bullshit reasons of why it's okay, and you're excusing this behavior. Because at first I started saying, hey, well, he's playing Roblox, but it's actually helping him read, because he desperately wants to be able to read the comments and everything, and he wants to talk to the other children, and so it has actually forced him to start reading. But then I was like, is that a good enough reason, right? But maybe it is, to your point. So some of my concerns is that I don't want him to become like just a mushy brain, you know, because you've seen those kids that are just like zombies, and you know, they're just almost in a trance, right? So that was, you know, one fear. Another fear is so much screen time and the what's it called, you know, like the rapid instant I don't know the proper words for it, I'm sorry, that you know, that can actually distract from them concentrating when it comes to learning by writing or books. So that was one. The other one is you know, just a fear of them being inactive. You know, here in the US, like, obesity is real with kids, and he's already a little bit chubby, and so it's like so I've got that as well. That but mostly it's the fact that I want him to, not his brain not to turn to mush. And like, is he, I don't know, because again, I feel like I've seen children that are just, they look brain dead to me. I've been to other people's houses, you know, friends and their kids that are like middle schoolers, and they don't even look like they're awake, you know. So yeah, I suppose
think, go ahead.
No, that I'm done. Thank you. I had to the ramble.
I think somebody else popped in too. No, was that you, Sarah? No. Oh, I want to take off on both what Sarah and Melissa just mentioned. And you know, these kids sometimes are very disconnected, and they are using video games as an escape maybe from their family life, from their school life, or from whatever difficult time that they're having. They are using it as an escape. But those of us who have kind of immersed ourselves in this see it being videos and video gaming as something that actually connects our kids. It connects them with us as parents, as a family. It connects them with their friends. And so like you were saying just now, you go to these people's houses and these kids, they feel, they seem so disconnected. And what we are seeing is vibrancy and connection and excitement, and like these are things like, and that they want to come out and share their triumphs and their, you know, and the things that don't go right, you know, and we're there to comfort them for that. There's so much connection happening there. Absolutely. And I think
so
it's really important.
That, like, if you embrace it, you can turn it around, that they'll come and share, and they're inviting us into their world, versus maybe some of these family friends that I've seen haven't, and they've put a barrier, and that's why the kids are closed off, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a big wall. They set up a big giant wall, you know, and you know, the wall is the video game, and the kids are on one side of it and the parents are on the other side of it, and there's no way to connect. And it's a shame. It's a shame. There's I want to mention a great resource, and I'll type it into the chat so you guys have it. Jane McGonigal, she wrote a book, Super Better, and I think it's like how video games make us better people. She also has a TED Talk about it, and she's got, you know, some really great insights, you know, and then we talk about the addiction thing, and maybe I want to address that right now a little bit too. We talk about the addiction thing, and like, yes, these video games are clicking that pleasure center in our brain, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to be happy and to find ways to pleasure yourself. We need to recognize if and when that becomes a destructive force within our lives. But you know, I mean, there, you know, the unschooling community has a scientific study they like to point to called the Rat Park study. And what it was some guy, I can't remember who it was, he decided to really test that theory about addiction, because all the studies had been done with these rats in these little cages with nothing else but either water or cocaine, right? And that's it. That's all they had, water or morphine, whatever. So what are you going to do if you're sitting around in a cage to do nothing else all day? I'm going to take the morphine too. So he designed this giant rat park with, you know, greenery and play spaces and the opportunity for mating and connection and to do life the way that they normally do. And significantly fewer, if very, very few, actually went towards the morphine laced water. And most of them were like, I want to live this life, you know? So I think a lot about addiction, and Gabor Mate has some really wonderful work on addiction. And my friend Tommy Rosen also, if you are struggling with any kinds of addiction, Recovery 2.0 is a great resource. But and Gabor does some work with Recovery 2.0. But it's very much about a lack of connection is really the root of addiction. That is this particular theory. And it's that lack of connection, and that lack of connection not only to the people that we love, but to everybody, the world around us, that leads to the despair and addiction, rather than the substance that itself. And yes, some of these substances are absolutely dangerous. And no, I would not let my kids take, cocaine just to see how they would react to it, let's do this thought experiment, right? But and on that end, I don't know if y'all saw this, but recently the FDA, not that I have a huge amount of, faith in what the FDA says is right and wrong, but the FDA did just approve the very first video game for treating ADHD. And the really cool thing about that is it's right here in Marin County. Well, it's based here in Marin County, and the tech part is here in Marin County, and the scientists are in Boston. And my husband just got hired. This is the new thing in our life. Yeah, it's huge, huge, huge. And they're doing work also, and I'm not sure if I'm really supposed to say this, but they're doing stuff for dementia and depression and other mental health stuff. And these are video games that will be prescribed to improve brain health. When all this time we've been told, oh, video games are going to melt your brain, right? No, it's actually, and I mean, the armed forces, our armed forces have been using video games for a long time to help, define, attention and acuity and all kinds of things. So they're not that bad.
Yeah, thank you. It's a refreshing perspective. So thank you. And I just wanted to say I've got a whole notepad of notes and things now to look up, and I've got so much homework. I'm very excited.
Melissa, I'm going to find the link of the conversation that I mentioned in the chat that I did several years ago with Dr. Peter Gray and a bunch of parents that are in support of their kids playing video games, and then the kids themselves talking about what that means. But the biggest thing that I learned from that conversation from Dr. Peter Gray and all the participants was the framing of video game addiction was what the detrimental part was. That thought, that idea of calling that an addiction, framed it in such a way that made it so incredibly unhealthy. And when the suggestion was made by Dr. Peter Gray to consider it as a family scheduling problem, that then put the power back into the family itself to then co-create your family culture. Well, what do we do as a family? How do we spend our time as a family? Are we all contributing to the idea of creating that family culture? Well, then if my kids said, yes, this is what I want to be a thriving part of my family culture, and I, as the kid, am not doing that, then where is my accountability for taking my part in the family scheduling? And then what does that look like as a family to solve the family scheduling problem? And then where do you, as a parent, fit in terms of how you schedule your time for work, family, and recreation? Like, all of this stuff goes into putting the power back into the family unit and defining and redefining and looking and re-examining what that means to you. So yeah, Julie, thank you. Those were incredible resources, and I forgot about a lot of those talks. Thank you so much. Yeah. Were there any other questions surrounding video games? Because that's huge.
Georgina just made a comment about, she's kind of saying, I think, like, oh, geez, should I be introducing technology? and that she's been against it. And I just wanted to talk to that just for a minute, because my children didn't have a lot of access to digital technology when they were little. And because when they were little, our life was such that it just wasn't, like we watched a movie every now and again. We went out and we just did lots of different things. And, I guess they weren't as exposed to the ideas because it just wasn't part of our life. But as they got older, and of course, as they seek out their own their own way of living. They found it, and so we then needed to make a decision, I guess. Are we going to follow their lead, or are we going to restrict them? And so then we needed to look to, this is where the family culture stuff is really important. We needed to look to what was that overarching value in our life. Is it that we want to work in partnership with our children, or is it something different? And for us, it was, yes, that is the overarching value. We want to be in partnership with our children. And so then it wasn't about us making a choice. It was about a conversation and having a family choice. But I wouldn't have probably thought about proactively introducing it because it wasn't a big part of my life. I do know lots of people who, like, their parents are really into gaming, and so their kids just grow up, it's part of their life. And so it's not even that they're introduced to it, it is just part of their life. And if it's not already part of your life, Georgina, and they're not seeking it, I guess there's no reason that you would introduce it in the same way as you probably wouldn't, I don't know, give them the car keys until they're asking for it, or they're ready to, you know, like they may at some point naturally say, oh, can I play with your phone, or can I have an iPad, or whatever. But if they don't even know about it because it's not part of your life, you know, maybe that's just, it's going to just take a natural, you know, it's going to take its natural course.
I do want to say that there is an aspect of the gaming that relates to the deschooling process. And anytime that Miro, my son, who is now 21, who was raised as an unschooler from the time he was 10 to now, he talks about his own deschooling, and he reflects and says, oh yeah, for the first year, I did nothing. I was lazy, I played video games, I did nothing. And he was empowered to go through that. And that was kind of difficult for me as the parent who had my own preconceived ideas about being productive. Like, that's one of the huge sort of deschooling moments that I went through in my own sort of programming. And it was more about my idea of what I thought and felt he should be doing than what he needed. And for him, he reflects, he didn't have any of the baggage associated with the thought that you have to be productive, and in order, you know, to be productive, you can't be lazy. And if you're lazy, you're worthless. Like, those are the programming stuff that I had to deschool myself with. He didn't have that. He had, I have power to make the choice over my life right now for the first time in my life. Not just necessarily from the family perspective, but from the school perspective, because he went to school until he was 9 years old, or 10, just turned 10 when he left. And so he took that as, okay, I'm going to choose what I'm doing with my time where I would normally be in school. This is what I choose. And so much came up for both of us in our own deschooling. And because we had the structure of the communication, like, we had a lot of practice communicating, and we continue still to this day, continue our communication. Like, it's all about having the language to process and unpack that as a family. And that fallible, that this is the thing that I'm dealing with, which is the same thing that Sarah said about her kids, to her kids, like, I'm having a hard time, I'm dealing and processing this. That's a really good habit to get into in terms of supporting your family culture, if the connection part is part of your values. Yeah. I hope that helped somebody.
I just realized that I don't think we've heard from Ivy at all. We also haven't heard from Anna, and we do know Anna a little bit, and I'm sure she'll jump in when she wants to. But Ivy, I haven't met, and I'm just curious to know how you are, Ivy, and where you're sitting, and whether you've got any concerns, whether you're facing having to homeschool, whether you're already homeschooling.
I am, well, we're going to homeschool this year. We're going between like homeschooling and doing the virtual school. My son's in 8th grade. And the rules for high school in our state is once they commit to homeschool, no credits count. So if he would want to go in like 10th grade, he would have to start back over in 9th grade. So we're in the process of kind of figuring out what to do in 8th grade to prepare for if he wants to go into 9th grade, because it's kind of like an all or nothing in West Virginia. Once you commit to high school, that's usually the plan that you stick with. So we're kind of in the fence between those two things. Definitely keeping him home this year. He's been begging for homeschool for about 2 years, and the end of the year having to do virtual school, which wasn't really like a full school experience, but he was on top of it. So he showed us that like he's definitely willing to put the time in and commit, and does well with self-learning. So we're kind of in that mess right now, just figuring out curriculum and whether to go full virtual through the school system or kind of come up with our own plan. Definitely gonna probably enhance if we do the full school route through his virtual school through the state, enhance with like the fun stuff that art, music, things that virtual program is missing. So that's kind of where we are.
I just wanted to say that, you know, we've talked about how kind of programmed we are to place so much value on the way schooling in that traditional sense plays out, and you get to the end of your schooling. I mean, we're in 3 or 4 different countries here, but the consistency is you get to the end of high school, you go to college or university, or you have a vocation or a traineeship or go into a trade or whatever, and then you are what it is that you said you wanted to be when you were about 12 or 13. And already, you know, if you talk to certainly my children, and I'm guessing many of your children too, if someone says, what do you want to be? They're like, even mean, like, I'm going to do 1,000 things before breakfast tomorrow. And they don't have this, you know, if we open up anyway, like they don't have this idea that I need to get to a certain age and have this particular qualification, and then I'm going to be this thing, and then that's it, tick. My 5 or 6 year old, she's 6, she plays games where, you know, she has jobs in these games where I have to say, hi, I'm Savannah, and I'm, you know, whatever. And she's always Rosie. And she's a lawnmower, and she works at Starbucks, and she builds houses, and she cuts down trees, and something else. There's about 5 or 6 things, and she's all of these things. And they're all the sorts of things that we would conventionally go, I'm using the royal we, not us here, but, you know, if your kid said they wanted to work at Starbucks, you'd be like, oh. You know, but she's like, I want to work at Starbucks, and I want to cut down trees, and I want to work in a wildlife park. And, you know, she may or may not do any of those things, but what it says to me is that our children don't have these limitations. They don't see, I have to go to school for 12 years and then I've got to do this next thing, and then I'm going to be the thing that I'm going to be. Like, they can be all of it, or one of it, or they'll choose something different tomorrow. And it's really exciting and freeing as a parent that I think our children already have released us from this idea that we've got to choose this thing, and then we'll know we've made it. Like, when we've got to that thing, you know, whatever it is, they don't have that. And there's so much opportunity. And that just popped into my head, Ivy, when you were talking, because I can feel like that the burden of responsibility that you must feel to help him through these next few years to reach his goal. And I'm not saying he shouldn't have those goals at all, but, you know, imagine if over the next few years he goes, I don't even have to finish high school by 18 or whatever, however old you are when you finish high school in the States. Like, I don't need that thing. Or he might decide he does, and he might do it when he's 25, or he might go to college a different way. Like I'm not familiar with the system in the States, but in Australia, there's multiple pathways to university. You don't have to finish, ladies, you don't have to finish school and then go to university at 18. You could go back when you're 30, having sat a test or various other pathways into uni. And I hope that by like opening up to the opportunities that our children present to us when they challenge us on this stuff, that we start to see that there are so many different ways to live a life, and they can all be amazing, and it's not finite, and there's no end point.
I want to do a quick check-in to see if we addressed all the fears that were expressed in the beginning of this call. I want to make sure that when we end this call that everybody feels like they were heard and their fears were understood, and that they were given some way of thinking from another perspective around those fears. So I just want to make sure that we don't leave or end this meeting without doing all of that. Do people want to unmute and either, yeah, okay, thumbs up is
Sorry,
a good thing too.
I'm making zucchini bread at the moment, so.
Sounds delicious.
Oh, have I got it? Okay. I just want to say that for me, I've been in this process for a couple of years, and it's so refreshing just to be part of the conversation again and just remind myself of fears that I did have or still there or just wanting to unpick. I think a few things for me have come out of this, which I certainly didn't have 2 years ago, which I now actually really treat my children as individuals. And what's right for one child isn't necessarily right for the next child or the other child. I have 3 children. And that for me has been a massive unpicking. I even had a child, we moved to America a few years ago, and I even specifically had a child in England, so both of them would have been born in the UK and not one in different countries. But I feel like for one of my children in particular, we've gone through sort of deschooling, and very much really self-directed learning. And I feel like almost on the other side of it, we know school is not anywhere near what we want for them, but equally we are really looking at wanting to find some alternative learning. Don't even know quite what the word is. And I mean, it's very hard at the moment because of things not being face-to-face, but we really feel like a face-to-face learning environment would be really positive for them. So maybe not now, but at some point or away from this, I'd really like to have that conversation. I mean, we're in this luxurious position of really sort of being able to go to most places to be able to find that. But yeah, I think it's really interesting when someone very, very much defines themselves as a learner and needs other people to create that sort of identity as well, how we find that out of a traditional school. So that's probably my one thing I'm still needing a little bit of support in. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to address that. One of the things that I find really difficult about this pandemic is that people are stuck in their own individual homes. And that to me is really difficult because I'm such a proponent of social learning. I believe that like I create learning communities. And to me, I think that's the most powerful way to learn, is to learn in community based on the intrinsic motivation to go down a certain path with a group of people and learn from all of the different perspectives. And I think by creating these communities and right now using online, this is what we got, let's use it. It's not the same as being in the same place, but we can do some virtual exploration and virtual learning communities. It's not the same. So I would totally, the first thing is I totally wanted to recognize how difficult social learning is right now. and acknowledge that, yeah, that's something that we're all trying to figure out. Yeah, the second thing is I really just I honor that even for you 2 years in the process, you're recognizing that there's still so much to learn. And I have to say, I've been on this road for now 12 years and I'm still learning and unpacking and figuring my shit out. So, but I welcome, the lifelong learning. And I think that kind of modeling that we're still working on ourselves as parents, and we're still trying to continue our own growth and learning process, because again, learning was redefined in my family as growth, and that shifted so deeply what it was that we were doing as active learners. Yeah, I hope that helped.
Yeah, it'll just be a case of exploring different things that are available. I think the online's a really interesting thing. I think for some children and adults, it's very easy. I think for others, especially, I think if you're used to picking up energy of the room and seeing how that works, the online just makes it's just an added I suppose even barrier, particularly if you don't know the people, and if you are someone that likes to feel like you belong, which I know we all do, but still working out those social interactions as well as everything else that's going on. So yeah, I mean, we do seek that out, but it's not always. It's when your children come off a call and they don't feel energized by it, that you then start to want to explore different areas to see what can happen.
And don't devalue the deep value of mentorship and apprenticeship. Those are two avenues that I would consider talking to your kids about and seeing, is there an apprenticeship based on one of your interests that we can pursue?
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
I think to some, I understand your frustration, Anna. That's kind of where we're at as well. And it almost seems at the moment like everyone's in a holding pattern. And when you're still sitting with this feeling that learning and education has to follow a particular time frame and a course, sometimes it can feel this year like, oh my goodness, we're wasting time, or we're losing time, or we're just that feeling of like, oh, we're stuck, we're still here, and it's so contrary to how we're programmed to be, making the most of every opportunity and making sure that we're ticking off on this, that, and the other. And so it feels really it feels really conflicting in a way, because it's the opposite to what we think we should be doing. Like, oh, we're still just sitting here, we're still just doing the same thing we were in February, and but everyone's doing it. So that's the great thing. Like, everyone really in our world is in this same position, and I've just been doing some work myself on, I guess, not feeling stuck. Like, we're not stuck. Where we can still, even just leaning into that is still growth. Every day at home that's slow is still another opportunity to connect with our kids, and every time we feel frustrated and someone gets angry about it and slams the door or whatever it is, it's another step closer to delving into deeper relationship and deeper partnership in our families and with our kids. And so I'm just really trying to focus on noticing those things too, while we're not able to get out and meet other people in the same way, or go to a class or something that we perhaps would be doing this year. We are spending more time working through conflict and working on our values as a family and listening to each other, and all of those things are as important, maybe even more important.
Ironically, I wish this child was a gamer. That's how far I've come in 2 years.
I have found myself saying to my 6-year-old when I'm trying to do work, can't you just go on your iPad? She's like, it's boring. I'm like, oh, what about I put a movie on? Come on.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge some of the things that Ivy's been saying in the chat. And I think one of the most powerful statements is trying to let go of the false narrative of kids getting, or being left behind. And I think we need to rewrite that program, as we talked about in the beginning of this call. We have the power to do that. We don't have to go on the habitual thinking. We don't have to stay on that same path. So powerful. I'm gonna save the chats and I'm gonna share it with everybody, and I'm gonna share a copy of this call, and we're gonna do this again actually for the Australian time zone. So you're clapping now, but it may not be super convenient for us. What time did we say, Sarah? What did we say?
I think we decided that I had to stay up to midnight and you had to get up at 6 a.m. or the other way around.
Something like that, something ridiculous, but we're gonna do it just so it's there. And if anybody else, I don't know, if you want to continue these conversations, we're happy to do it too. There's, again, no agenda. It's just about having that community of support. And I am so honored and thrilled that so many veterans showed up to this call. Like, how beautiful is that? They spent 2 hours of their time to be in support of your journey. And so I'm grateful for everybody who was here, even those that have already left. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I just want to say that as well to the veterans, especially because it has now been over 2 hours. And I think the insights and the resources you've shared have been really invaluable, because I came onto this thinking I was just going to kind of sit here as a bystander, just like, just peek in and see what was happening, and didn't really, I didn't know what I was going to get out of it. And I've got a lot, so I really appreciate that. And I'll get up again at midnight, because I think that'll be worth it just to listen to the Aussies, because that's going to be a fun conversation. So
I'm a little scared.
I just wanted to say too that when a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, whenever it was that we were like thinking we probably needed to delve into homeschooling, but I was still really scared, and it was like, oh, can I spend all day every day with all of my children, and am I going to fail? All of the stuff that everyone's scared of. And I had a couple of people that just had been quietly cheering me on, actually for a few years, really, that just kept saying, like, you can do it. Not in a pushy way, but they were just there. They just stayed connected. They used to like invite us to all the homeschool stuff, and we'd hang out with them a lot, and they just kept on giving me confidence that we could do it, and to listen to that little voice that was in my heart. And I mean, those people are still in my life, and they're still really important. And I think it's just, it's so important to have people in your corner that just keep saying to you, you can do it. It's amazing. It's hard. Every day can be a little bit insane, but you absolutely can do it. And to live in partnership with your kids and your family is such a gift and such a joy. And I'm really happy to just keep cheering people on, really, and just to keep on telling you that you can do it. You guys can do whatever you want to do.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So yeah, reach out. I'm sure, I mean, I'm not going to commit for anybody who hasn't committed for themselves, but if you need to reach out to anybody here, I'm sure they'll be accepting of a message. And as I will be, absolutely, for sure, if there's something I can do to help, and I'm sure Sarah as well. So thank you.
Can I just say one little thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah.
Georgina, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, like, if anyone's, especially younger kids, I'd really like to connect with more people. That's one of the reasons I came on this call particularly, is that for me, a lot of my people that I really connect with who are homeschoolers have got children who are teens, and they've been great like support and inspiration for me, but they don't really have children who are going through similar kind of stages as my children are. And so I really wanted to just connect with more people who are homeschooling younger children, not necessarily 4 and 5, but kind of under the age of 8 or 9, because my kids actually really thrive from knowing other older children. And so a couple of my kids are quite like hyper focused, interested beyond their age level of certain things. So I kind of like finding younger children. So parents who are doing that, I'd love to connect, because that's kind of one of the reasons I came on this call, is that I'm confident in my homeschooling, but I wanted to know more people who were at that journey with me. So yeah, feel free.
Yeah, sorry, Georgina. I just, my kids are 4 and 7, and actually it's, I have no one here around me that same age that are doing word schooling. So definitely let's keep in touch.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the call now. Thank you all so much. And I'll post a link. I'll post this somewhere, and I'll post the link in our group, in our event. Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.